This is another one of a series of videos that I am going to be doing today that I should have done earlier this week. In the last live video that I did about an hour ago, you'll see a September preview. That is actually exactly the title of the video, where we talk about the focus on education in September of 22, as well as the Jackson water crisis. That video ran long, and so I decided to break out the urgency of the Jackson water crisis into its own live. Now, I want to be clear that this is only a preview. The issues surrounding the Jackson water crisis go beyond a 10-minute talk or even a 30-minute talk. To talk about the urgency of Jackson is to put our fingers and put our attention onto a lot of pies. It also, of course, evokes the ongoing crisis in Flint, Michigan. Why is this so important beyond the immediacy of the moment? Well, obviously, people do not have potable water. Parts of Jackson, Mississippi, particularly the most marginalized parts of Jackson, Mississippi, has been under a boiled water order way before the current extant crisis. There are 3 articles that I'm going to share with you that go deeper and deeper into the tiramisu, into the soup of everything that precipitated the crisis in Jackson, Mississippi. The first and most accessible, and one could also say the most superficial one, but I still think it's important to read, comes from Slate.com. There is a more comprehensive article that comes out of a regional online publication, and then there is still a third that looks at the institutional and the systemic problems and issues that made this, I don't want to call it a perfect storm, but yes, this perfect storm possible. There's no way to talk about the water crisis without talking about housing policy, without talking about infrastructure that housing policy drives, without talking about corporate divestiture, without talking about white flight. Now, we could keep our focus very narrow and only look at the crisis in Mississippi, but the crisis in Mississippi is both a metaphor and a microcosm, as well as being all too real. Any major metropolitan city that has a significant Black population has, to varying degrees, suffered the same issues that Jackson, Mississippi has. The bigger the city, sometimes the bigger the problem. Sometimes because of just sheer scale, the problems are exacerbated. Sometimes they're a little less acute, but they're all chronic. I think about my own county, San Diego County, which does not have one water authority. Now part of it is not racialized. San Diego, California, especially the outlying areas, were very agrarian not too many decades ago, and we still do have a very large agricultural industry. So it makes sense that the water that I drink, which is San Diego City, might be different from some of the outlying areas in San Diego's North and East counties. But it is racialized in the sense that you can't talk about the build out of North and East County in terms of residential construction and in terms of manufacturing that moved from city center into those outlying areas without it being racialized. Let's move back to Jackson, Mississippi for a moment. Jackson, Mississippi has certainly seen its share of divestiture, mostly in terms of white flight and the tax increment that went with it. When we talk more and more, not just about Jackson, Mississippi, but also about the larger issues of housing policy, and we're going to fold in corporate relocation and how corporations shape municipal areas, regions, and counties. We need to be able to have a hard look at the choices that we make, not just governments, not just corporations, but the choices that we make that either serve to, wait for it, lessen and mitigate the harm endured by Black and brown people, perpetuated by white people and white supremacy, that either lessen and mitigate or that exacerbate. If you are living in a suburban area, the odds are it's been the latter choice. It has exacerbated inequality. It has exacerbated higher risk factors for Black and brown people. And when we talk about housing policy, we're also going to look at the very ironic and sometimes dichotomic forces that pull areas that either people know were brought about by white flight or that people don't know were brought about by white flight, and what that has meant. We're going to talk about it a little bit in this month of education, because we can't talk about education without talking about desegregation and integration and the lengths that white people and municipalities and regions and states went to sabotage and thwart authentic and durable integration efforts. But I want to keep the focus on Jackson, Mississippi. In an interesting coincidence, one of the delinquents, what I call my leadership team, one of my delinquents posted in our Discord chat that she was going to send a case of water to Jackson, Mississippi, because right now that is how they're getting their water. That's how they're cooking with their water. That's how they're brushing their teeth with their water. And I thought about it. I think that it is a morally exemplary act to do so, and I applauded her and affirmed her doing so. And in fact, we're going to talk about what we can do from here. I'm actually talking to someone who I greatly respect in that region. She herself, I think, is based in Alabama, but she has her fingers in Mississippi pies, and she knows the region. What are the alternatives to spending water, to spending retail prices and then shipping from Idaho or San Diego or Iowa or Wisconsin down to Mississippi? That is where we start talking about addressing both the acute issue that's extant as well as the chronic problems that led to this. We want to be able to do both. And currently, Lace on Race, even though we have a community partner for the month of September, are also going to make this effort part of an ongoing effort. I do not know if they're going to be an official community partner for the month of September or the month of October, but I am giving you notice that I will be putting out an appeal. But we want to do it well. We don't want to just do what some people do. Look at the acute, but not look at the systemic. But at the other side of this, we also do not want to only focus on the systemic while real needs are being unmet. I'm going to say that again. While real needs are going unmet. We want to do both. And in so many ways, including our focus on the good place, as Pillboy and Donkey Doug would say, you both it. You look at the acute and you also look at the systemic. We talk about what kind of a country that we are, and I have seen people metaphorically clutch their pearls. They did it when they heard about the crisis in Flint, And they're doing it to a smaller extent now because less is known about it now. But to the extent that I have a platform and to the extent that I can point people's attention to what needs to happen in the here and now, I'm going to use it. The Mississippi crisis, much like the Michigan crisis, is unconscionable. There is no way that water towers should be empty. And while I have absolute appreciation for the acute crisis, the floodwaters that tipped Mississippi over the edge, the fact of the matter is that it should have been done. And it was a failure on a lot of levels, including the European German company Siemens that had a $90 million contract that wound up not only stripping the city of that large amount of money, but also because of faulty water meters, either overcharged groups of people or didn't charge them at all, leading officials to basically say, pay what you think you owe. And you can pretty much guess how that went. So there's a lot of accountability to go around. We can talk about all of these failures at the governmental level. But at the end of the day, there's an 80-year-old grandmother with her 4-year-old grandson that are sharing one bottle of water because they only got 5 bottles of water last Friday. When we talk about the idea that America can and should do better, I absolutely agree. And I think that the focus should be on and should stay on Jackson, Mississippi, not to the detriment of Flint, but there needs to be a laser focus on this current crisis. And then, at the same time, at the same time, we need to look at the forces that got us there. And we also need to pan out in terms of the macro and look at vulnerable infrastructure systems in other parts of the country, water and everything else. There is currently a power crisis in terms of the power grid. There's currently not just water and power, but other infrastructure such as roads, such as highway, that disproportionately affect black and brown people when things go sideways, mostly because there's no room to make reserves and no room to make strategic plans down the road. Those are the people that get harmed most. We talk a lot about doing the things that matter, but that aren't particularly sexy. Infrastructure isn't particularly sexy or activating. Talking about kilowatt hours and underground power lines as opposed to above ground power lines. Talking about water main systems, talking about water runoff, are not things that get your blood boiling, but it should. A lot of the pieces, parts of governmental services and programs don't elicit emotion because they're invisible. You only notice them when they fail. And if you're white and you live in a mostly white area, and the odds are pretty darn high that you do, you don't think about the fact that when there is a failure, it is much more likely to happen in marginalized parts of the city. And you certainly don't extrapolate that out to, and that's exactly how it was designed. Much like we talk about conscious consumerism, and we're going to talk about that in November, get ready. A lot of times when we talk about conscious consumerism, very usually we only talk about the end user experience, but we don't talk about the supply chain. We don't talk about soup to nuts. We need to start doing that in terms of consumer activism and conscious consumerism. We also need to do that about the services that we consume at the governmental level, whether it be local, state, regional, or national. And we need to start asking better questions, as Padraig Tuama would say. Like I said in an essay and a video a while back, it is not enough to say what you will or won't do, because corporations don't know if you're doing it or if you're not doing it. Corporations don't know if you're saying no to Walmart and yes to Target unless both Walmart and Target know. And you need to keep both of their feet to the fire. People don't know if you are going to go to Popeyes or Chick-fil-A. They don't know if you're doing it, they don't know what your choice is, and they don't know why your choice is unless you take the next step of telling them. It's the same thing with governmental services. If you are lucky enough to have services good enough that you don't have to think about them, you still need to think about it, because the next question should be, well, it's working out for me, but who isn't it working for? So if you're doing, I'm going to use San Diego because that's where I am. So if you're asking, if you're feeling great about water runoff in Rancho Penasquitos, you need to ask the next question and ask, how is that water runoff doing in Barrio Logan? If you feel comfortable with the way San Diego Gas and Electric is keeping your infrastructure safe and reliable, you need to ask the next question, is it happening in San Ysidro? If you feel that your water is safe to drink in La Jolla, you need to ask, well, okay, is it safe to drink in Imperial Beach? If you are not asking those questions, you are, however unwittingly, participating in institutional and structural oppression. One of the things that we want to do at Lace on Race is to encourage and invite and even goad you to ask the better questions and to not just stop with your own situation. I think about the white areas that fled Jackson, Mississippi, but didn't go far away. They enveloped Jackson. Why they were not asking these questions, and why, once they know, were they not willing to use their own resources, most of which was pulled out of Jackson, Mississippi, to aid their black and brown and working class brothers and sisters. This time 40 years ago, Jackson, Mississippi was majority white. Now I think it's 17% white, and it tracks. And we need to be able to focus on Jackson, but once that acute crisis is met, we also need to look at our own communities. I'm going to be doing an essay in which I will make sure that I give the links to those 3 articles that I talked about. But meanwhile, be preparing yourself. Be preparing yourself to ask the hard questions, and also prepare yourself to respond when I give an appeal for the brothers and sisters of Jackson, Mississippi. We do community partners, and we are unwavering on that. I would like to do 2 this month, regardless of our reduction in income. I'd like to keep our promise to the education community partner, and I also want to be able to lock and load in the best possible way on Jackson, Mississippi. They need to know that we care about them, their acute needs, and the larger issues that made Jackson, Mississippi possible. Get ready to serve, and get ready to show up. As always, the Lace on Race Center for Racial Equity thanks you. If you like what you were seeing, make sure that you are hitting like and subscribe and hitting that button on whatever platform that you see. If you want to see more of our takes on both current events and on enduring issues, make sure that you choose to support the Liaison Race Center for Racial Equity so that we can continue not only to bring you what we feel is some of the best original and aggregated content on the web, but so that we can keep our promises and make new promises, bigger promises, to organizations that live out North Star values, lessening and mitigating the harm endured by brown and black people, perpetuated by white people and white supremacy. It can be a one-time gift. You can become a sustainer. And if you want more information on any of this, or if you want to target your gift to a specific program, shoot us a message and we'll tell you how to do it. Be here for us so we can continue to be here for the people we stand for and with. Thank you.